According to reports, Aliko Dangote, the refinery CEO, revealed that NNPC now holds only 7.2% instead of the initially planned 20%. This turn of events raises questions about the details of the transaction and the impact on Nigeria's energy security. So this morning, Femi Oladehin, senior partner at Argentil Capital Management Limited, joins me to discuss this. Thank you so much, Femi, for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
So, as an industry player, what was your initial reaction to this particular news? Did you see it coming?
Maybe. Whilst the details of the transaction between NNPC and Dangote Refinery were not exactly in the public domain, it was clear that there were certain obligations that the NNPC had to fulfill for them to be able to get those shares. At the time when that transaction happened, there was the belief that some level of crude supply would be part of the solution that the NNPC was looking at, which is, as part of the way they were going to pay for their equity in the business. But it's obvious that that hasn't happened. And the details of the transaction, obviously, imagine saying that there's certain cash contributions that the NNPC should have made to allow it earn its shares in the company, and those cash contributions haven't been made. It also appears, going from Aliko's comments, that there was a time constraint, or there was a timing constraint within which the NNPC needed to meet those obligations, and that those expired in June. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the deal is dead in the water. Most of this type of agreements, you would usually have extension clauses and waivers, where the parties can decide together to jointly waive either time constraints or value constraints. But what is probably the bigger picture here is that the constraints on the financing position of the NNPC is becoming even clearer to everyone to see now, as he has failed to meet this obligation to Dangote Refinery.
So talking about the cash contribution, to complete the $2.76 billion for the 20% stake, the NNPC agreed to give Dangote Refinery a $2.05 discount per barrel on the official selling price for 300,000 barrels per day, and 100% of NNPC's portion of any dividend declared by the refinery throughout the repayment period. That was the agreement between the two entities. So what could have actually gone wrong? Because you just said now that it is so glaring that NNPC is not able to meet that particular obligation. I'd like to find out, why did the company not meet that?
So there are a couple of things. In the last probably few years, you would also be aware that the NNPC has pledged a significant number of its barrels as part of some of its funding obligations or its fundraising efforts. And those barrels obviously come at a cost and a commitment to the people who they've pledged those barrels to sell at a particular price and particular quantities. I know, for example, that the NNPC recently just concluded Project Gazelle, where 90,000 barrels a day of crude were pledged as security for that facility. Now, obviously, 90,000 barrels of crude a day is already a significant portion of NNPC's crude allocation. If you look at those numbers, if Nigeria is doing 1.2 million barrels today, and most of the NNPC's contracts are in JVs or PSCs, maybe the NNPC is probably getting 500,000 barrels a day. If it's already pledged 90,000, and into other transactions, it's also pledged crude, it's obvious that its capacity is significantly constrained, especially given the poor level of production that we've had. If you recall, the NNPC GMD probably about a week or two ago, announced a state of emergency on crude production. I think those things are bringing to fore what has been brewing over the last few years, in the sense that progressively and consistently, we were losing about 100,000 barrels of production a day. From a peak of about 2 million in 2015, today we're literally struggling to do 1.3 million barrels a day. And of course, the implication of that is NNPC has less cash because it's selling fewer barrels of crude. NNPC has also pledged a lot of its crude to other financing arrangements, and that is even further constraining. So I don't even see the NNPC having the capacity to deliver the barrels that Dangote Refinery requires at this time, because I don't believe that those barrels are even available in the first place.
Okay, so what do you think would be wise now for NNPC to do? Probably to backpedal or something, because we recall that there's also another 90,000 barrels per day oil for debt to Afrexim Bank. That one is also in the offing. So if Nigeria
So
is not
that's the
able
one I
to,
just talked about. That's Project Gazelle.
okay,
Yeah.
so what would now be the wise thing or the wisest thing now for the NNPC or Nigeria to do when it can't meet its crude productions, but then keeps seeking how to get these loans?
Fixed production. It's not that complicated. The reality is, and we've been saying this, I think one of the things that happened when the president came in May of 2023, what I expected when he made the statement that subsidy is gone. The next thing I expected that was going to come out of his mouth was that we're declaring a state of emergency in the Niger Delta, especially for crude oil production. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened for whatever reasons, and that has created the problem we have now, where production has more or less dried up, and the concomitant impact on the finances of the country. So the truth is that we're focused on NNPC, but the reality is that Nigeria itself is a derivative of what happens in NNPC. If NNPC is broke, then the tendency is that Nigeria is going to be broke. And we're saying the only solution really is increased production. Today, crude oil prices are trading at about $80. Just think about it. Every day that we have about 800, 900,000 barrels of crude that ordinarily would have been able to sell at $80. Just do the numbers. That tells you how much money we're leaving on the table. Then in addition to that, you have to actually accept that there's also a lot of till today, there is still a lot of stealing of Nigerian crude, illegal bunkering of Nigerian crude. So we just need to find a proper solution to the production woes that the industry has gone through. And, don't even get me started on the PIA. It took us 20 years to pass the most important legislation in the history of the country. And by the time we passed that legislation, all of the IOCs who would have made long-term investment plans have moved on to other countries, where we're literally suffering for the incompetence of the previous government in not seeing that through. So look, NNPC's position is a very difficult one, and it's not necessarily an indictment on the current management, but the reality is that there are issues that need to be resolved, and it requires decisiveness. It requires sometimes even heavy-handedness to ensure that we can get production back running.
Okay, well, talking about finding solutions, I see that Dangote is already sourcing that for itself, because it mentioned that it had challenges regarding sourcing crude oil from the refinery in Nigeria, and it confirmed that the company has been sourcing from the US and Brazil. So when, of course, Dangote continues to toe this line, what implication do you think it would have for Nigeria's refinery, for Nigeria itself, and for the eventual price of crude by the time it's being made available to local, IPMAN, that's the petroleum marketers?
Oh, so look, I mean, as you know, Dangote is a private business, so he's not in the business of subsidizing anyone. He's going to look for the most efficient and the most price-efficient way for him to get his production running and continue to do so. And you must understand that for him, what is key is that his refinery must keep running. You have to understand that a refinery is not like a banking app that you can switch on and switch off. To restart a refinery, you're talking about a couple of millions, tens of millions of dollars if you were to shut down a refinery at any point in time, to get your boilers running again, to get your pipelines freed, and for sludge not to build up in your pipelines. There is significant things to think about when it comes to the operations of a refinery. So Dangote knows that the only way his refinery is going to operate efficiently is if he has guarantee of supply of crude. And trust me, he wouldn't really care at what price he's buying that crude in the first instance, because the opportunity cost of not having crude to run his refinery is significantly worse than the price differential between him paying a premium on transport and all of that for the crude. But again, the long-term solution always has to be that Dangote built his refinery because Nigeria was a good supply of crude. Nigeria has sweet crude. It is light. It's not difficult for you to crack into its smallest molecules. And so it was efficient for him to have built that refinery. But the refinery only works efficiently for Nigeria and for him if the values if the value chain is efficient, and as of today it isn't, simply because that you just can't guarantee supply of crude from the Nigerian producers, and that in itself is sad.
Pretty sad, I must say. Also, even as I re-echo what you said, what is imperative right now is to see that the production levels go up if there's any meaningful appreciation that Nigeria is to get from this. Femi Oladehin, Senior Partner, Argentil Capital Management Limited, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.